Doherty, the 6'7" sophomore from East Meadow, New York.
Leadership is learned.
A starter on Coach Dean Smith's legendary 1982 Tar Heels National Championship team with Michael Jordan.
Jordan comes down with a rebound. Clears it away to Doherty. Doherty going in against Floyd for the layup. It's good.
Leadership is earned.
Head coach at the University of North Carolina and the University of Notre Dame.
You notice Matt Doherty, he is up working every second of this ball game.
Leadership is taught.
Public speaker, author, and executive coach.
And leadership does not require a title.
This is the Rebound Podcast with Coach Matt Doherty.
Welcome to the Rebound Podcast. I'm Matt Doherty, and I'll be your host. On this podcast, we focus on the topic of leadership and overcoming adversity in an open and raw kind of way. We discuss setbacks and how to rebound from them. I became passionate about leadership after being forced to resign from my coaching job at the University of North Carolina in 2003. I went on a leadership journey and realized it may be the most under-taught topic in formal schooling, yet may be the most important. With me today is Ryan Leaf, former NFL quarterback. After a stellar career at Washington State University, Ryan was drafted number 2 overall in the 1998 NFL Draft behind Peyton Manning. Reportedly, his career was cut short due to a variety of issues, both on and off the field. Ryan then fell on harder times that involved some drugs and jail time. This is a story of rebounding. Welcome, Ryan. Thanks for joining me on the Rebound Podcast.
You bet. Thanks, Coach, for having me.
Tell the audience, Ryan, about your journey to the top of the football world.
Well, it was all I ever knew was competition, so I didn't necessarily know if it was going to be football. Basketball was always my favorite sport to play, and my intention was to, continue to play every sport I could all through college. And ultimately, after trying to play basketball, baseball, and football my freshman year, Coach came to me and said, you really could make a living at this football thing. So we really focused in on that. I always had dreams of being, a professional athlete. But when you come from the state of Montana, that's pretty much a pipe dream. I mean, until I was drafted in the first round, there had never been a Montanan drafted in the first round. So, there are more first round draft picks in the Manning family than the whole state of Montana ever. So I had to blaze my own trail a bit, but luckily I made the best choice on where to go to college and play for a man who taught me everything I needed to know about playing the game of football and doing it well. And we did something that hadn't been done in 67 years. We won a championship and played in a Rose Bowl for a national championship. And, Washington State just never got to do anything like that. So that season was really special. And it catapulted me on top of this pedestal that would take me on a wild ride. But, I'd always had dreams and aspirations of being a professional athlete. And I think most kids do. Luckily I was blessed with God-given talent and great coaching.
And you mention your coach often. Tell the audience who that coach was.
Right. Mike Price was my head coach at Washington State. And, he was really like a second father to me, being away from my family. And, he called me. This was his recruiting pitch. It was January 1st, 1994. I was watching UCLA in Wisconsin play for the Rose Bowl, and I got a call from Mike Price, and he asked me what I was doing, and I told him. He said, "Well, I'll make you a deal." He said, "If you come here and play for me, we'll play in that game together." And it was something as simple as that any coach could have said. It just felt personal in the moment, and I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I ran into mom and dad's bedroom and told them I'm going to Washington State. They seemed pleased because it was close enough to home, but I think far enough away where I could, finally branch out with my independence a little bit. I didn't do any research. I didn't realize they hadn't been there since 1931. So it was a real leap of faith. It really was. And I remember him and I walking out onto that field on picture day before the game, and we saw Washington State down in the end zone, and it was a dream come true for him and definitely for me. And he kind of brought me along for the ride, and we had a lot of fun doing it.
So you have this magical season, and then there's prep for the draft. What was that like as you prepared for the draft and the talk of, you being number one or Peyton Manning being number one?
Well, there really wasn't too much to it. We were going to be either the first or second picks. There was really no discussion otherwise. And so, all the offseason was really about getting in shape, and getting ready to go to either Indianapolis or San Diego. I was hoping a lot for San Diego. So, there really wasn't much. The conversation was just, who should you pick?
Mm-hmm.
Peyton or Ryan. And everybody pretty much felt like you couldn't go wrong with either guy. You were kind of getting draft player 1A and 1B. And that's the way we were looking at it. I was excited to get to San Diego. I was excited, to be a professional quarterback. I just was not prepared for failure. That's the best way to put it. I was not prepared for failure and the microscope and criticism that came with being an NFL quarterback. You get sheltered in a little town in Montana. You get sheltered in a little town in Pullman, Washington. And now it was different. And now my character defects were on full display for everybody to see. People who were close to me my whole life knew, those character defects. And now the whole world were getting to see it. And that was not a recipe for it was a recipe for disaster is what it was.
What were those character defects, and when did they first start showing up in your life?
Probably the first time I got placed on a pedestal in my hometown for being able to throw a football farther than anybody, How
old were you then?
Consequences not as severe for me when I acted out. I don't know, probably 11 years old,
Mm-hmm.
So, I probably stopped developing, but, I had an arrested development probably around 11 or 12 or 13 years old where I didn't mature. I was just really good at something. And if people ever gave me, I just beat them down and I embarrassed them on the basketball court or the football field or the baseball diamond. That's how I won. And I told everybody I was going to come back and you were going to be pumping my gas. I was an absolute, that's how I was. I wasn't a popular kid. I wasn't well liked. My hometown didn't like me. But there's a reason why, no one had ever left the state to go play professional football like that because, you had to be a different kind of person. And I think most people who make it to that level are. It's just a matter of how you deal with failure and criticism and judgment. That stuff is incredibly difficult to do when you are an entitled piece of So my way was to just come back harder than how you were coming back to me. And that's just, you can't battle the best defenses in the NFL every Sunday and then the media and the fans and the people and everything from Sunday to Sunday. It's not going to work. And it played out in front of everybody.
When you were in my book, Rebound from Pain to Passion, I talk about the importance of having truth tellers in our lives. People that will say, hey, Matt, hey, Ryan, you're acting like a fool. Where were those people?
They were there. They were there. I had Junior Seau. I had Rodney Harrison. I had ownership. I had my family. But, hey, I had all the money. I had all the power. I had all the prestige. You weren't going to tell me anything. So this could have easily been changed if I would have just been open to hearing, but I surrounded myself with yes men instead, pretending I was the victim. Even when I decided to quit after 4 years, I still thought everything was going to be fine because, I still had what made you a success. Money, power, and prestige. That's what I thought was real success. I forgot to reestablish new goals when I got there. I got to this mountaintop And I looked out and surveyed all I had conquered. And I just started going down the hill instead of setting new goals that were higher up to achieve. I just, it's a hard thing to look in the mirror and say, your failure was because of all because of you, but it's true. That's the accountability of it.
When did you reach that point? When were you totally broken? Never. I think you're totally broken if you don't get up. So I don't think I ever, I always thought, I was the next snap away from throwing a 80-yard touchdown and everybody loving me again. And then, okay, you decide to quit. What went into deciding to, after 4 years? You were what, 27, 28? I think 25. And why at 25? I was so tired of being beat up physically, mentally, and I was dealing with a lot of mental illness. I was dealing with a ton of depression and anxiety. And instead of going into Mike Holmgren's office, I was with the Seattle Seahawks at the time, and telling him all that I was having a real hard time getting out of bed, that I felt sad and all the time, and I felt really lazy. And I just told him I quit. I figured if I just went away and all the judgment and everything went away, I would be fine, because I'd still have, those things that I thought were success. But, I forget that I was drafted alongside arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play. And every April, my name's going to be brought to the forefront of what not to do, what not to draft. And the word bust became pretty prevalent. And so I couldn't escape it. And I also am a narcissist. So I need people to think or see me as having it all still, so I'd go to Vegas, or but otherwise that I was just hiding in my palatial mansion in San Diego, trying to figure out what to do next. And I didn't know. So I had all this mental illness that was affecting me, untreated, and just with no purpose. So it was just another recipe for disaster, a continuation. And then one of those trips to Vegas, an acquaintance of mine offered me some Vicodin when we were at the parties, where there are, former NFL Hall of Famers and Super Bowl champs, where I always felt judged and less than. And he offered me some Vicodin, and I had taken that before. I have had multiple surgeries, of course, because of my orthopedic surgeries from playing football. So I knew what it was, but this would be the first time that I really kind of abused it. And I took a couple pills with the alcohol I was drinking that night, and I walked in and out of those parties and didn't feel any of that. Didn't feel any of that judgment. Didn't feel any of that less than. I was in a ton of emotional pain, and they're called painkillers for a reason. That's exactly what they do. And it worked for me. I didn't feel better. But I didn't feel anything. And I realized I'd been searching for probably 5 years, probably longer than that, probably as far back as, when my hometown and my state just treated me like when I was a kid. I just didn't want to feel any of it. So I think I'd probably been searching for that for a decade. And I finally found my answer. And that would be the next 8 years of my life, chasing that feeling of not feeling away. And that's what it was. And at first it was easy because I had a lot of money. But when you're making $5 million a year and you quit that job and still live a lifestyle like you're making $5 million a year, and you have a terrible opiate drug problem, money goes away until I'm back home in a town where I'm supposed to be the hero. Instead, I'm the villain, and I'm living in a little apartment. And the first thing in my mind every morning when I wake up is, do I have pills? And if I didn't, how do I get them? That was my day. And that was my only obsession. Didn't think about anything else. Didn't think about anybody else. It was all about that. It's all about me. And it
it just took me to a bottom where, I clamored out for somebody to help me, but to nobody in particular, just to the heavens, to the gods, whatever. And luckily for me, the sheriff's department showed up to save my life.
How so?
Well, they came to arrest me.
For what?
For stealing pills. I mean, I had to find out. I mean, every morning I woke up and I didn't have any. I had to figure out a way to get them. And that turned into going to acquaintances' homes, pretending I was interested in saying hi, only to rummage through their medicine cabinets, or at the end of it all, traveling around my hometown and knocking on doors out on the outskirts of town. And if no one answered, I'd feel the door. If it was unlocked, I'd let myself in. And 9 times out of 10, there was a bottle of some sort of opiate painkiller in their medicine cabinet. And that's, my hometown became my drug dealer of sorts, I guess. But I'm a terrible criminal. And of course I was found out right away.
Yeah, well, at 6'5", 235 pounds, the most famous person from the state. Yeah, I'm sure you. And
they showed up. They showed up on March 30th, 2012, and saved my life. I think I was pleading for my higher power to help me a lot over the last 5 years, and finally, he just said, "Okay, you don't get it, kid. So I'm gonna send the sheriff's department to help you." And that's what happened.
Are you a Christian, Ryan?
I'm spiritual. I don't prescribe to any particular religion, but I understand there's no reason why I should be here. So there's something greater than me out there. So I delve deep into the spirituality of things, that there's something greater than me, that there is a God and I'm not him. I think that's the best way to put it. And let go and let God. That's the spiritual side of things for over the last 9 years of my life. But I don't prescribe to a particular religion. I just kind of steal from all of them, all the best parts.
So March 30th, 2012, you get arrested. What was that day like for you?
Relief, probably. Ton of shame, but now I didn't have to answer to anybody or anything. And again, the selfish nature of it, I placed it all on my family and all the people that supported me, and just gave everybody, all the detractors, more ammunition to just, bomb me. But hey, I was in a cell. I didn't have to deal with any of it anymore. And guess what? I stayed there for 32 months. It could have been out in 6. Instead, I kept denying parole, and I just stayed there. One of the most selfish things I could have done, just continue to kill my family, who just wanted nothing more than to have their son and brother living a good life, whether they could share with them. But I just stayed and disappeared and got worse, became more self-loathing. It proved that I was a drug addict long before I ever took a drug, because the drug was taken away from me. Right. I didn't have any of that, but I was still this miserable, narcissistic, and probably got worse in that process. So, I wasn't getting better because the substance was taken away from me. My deal is a brain illness. I have mental illness, and the addiction was just a symptom of that. And this was clearly being laid out in front of me while I was sitting in a prison cell for those 32 months.
How did you come to realize you had the mental illness? Well,
I mean, I couldn't get out of bed when I was playing football. Yeah. I had panic attacks. I didn't know if I didn't necessarily have a identifier for it, but of course, clearly now, going through what I went through and being diagnosed from when I went to treatment, PTSD and clinical depression, narcissistic personality disorder, all these things that contribute to, and I just self-medicated. I didn't go about it the right way. I did it my way, as I always have in my life. Just did it my way instead of surrendering and accepting help. I sat there in a prison cell for 32 months doing nothing.
What was the turning point for you sitting in that prison cell? When did you hit the bottom, and who helped you?
Well, like I said before, I don't necessarily think I hit a bottom. You'd think it would be, taking a knife to your wrist, trying to take your own life. Then you thought it would be waking up on a jail floor after being arrested twice in 48 hours, or you think you'd being sentenced to 7 years in prison. I think all those things would be bottoms, but they weren't. Prison isn't a deterrent. Prison is another society in our country. It's the reason why we're the most heavily populated prison system in the world. I had a little flat screen TV, 13-inch flat screen at the end of my bed with the NFL Red Zone in the fall.
What?
I had whatever I wanted in there. I didn't have any responsibility. Now, of course, you're surrounded by the worst possible people. The guards are just as horrible as the other inmates. But if you just stay in your room, keep to yourself. I didn't go outside for I went outside twice in those 32 months. It was the epitome of clinical depression. And now, luckily for me, like I talked about my higher power before, it showed up again in the form of my roommate. He was a Afghan Iraqi war veteran who had done something I think a lot of people have done in their life, and that's drive drunk at some point. It just so happened that night he killed somebody. And so he'd been in prison the last 8 years, and he was not okay or resolute with being that version of himself. He had made amends for what he had done, and he tried to better himself every day in there. And I watched him do it, and I thought, what are you doing, man? This is stupid. Look at us. We're losers. We're inmates in prison. That's not going to help anything. And finally, I guess one day he had enough of me and felt comfortable enough to confront me. And he said, I didn't understand the value that I had, not only for the men in here, but for when I got out. Because he said, Ryan, you're going to get out at some point, and I may never. And so he suggested us go down to the prison library and help prisoners who didn't know how to read learn how to read. Now, I've had many of these, come to Jesus moments from coaches and mentors and family. And I just, flipped them all the bird, said, I got this. So I can't tell you why I was open-minded to it then, maybe because the substance had been out of my system for, 26 months. But I acquiesced begrudgingly, though. I mean, I still remember walking down the hallway in my red jumpsuit in a prison hallway, thinking this is so stupid. This isn't going to help me. Doesn't even understand how important I am.
Wow.
And that's the ignorance of a narcissism of a guy who's in a prison in a red jumpsuit, thinking he's important. And I walked into this room where there are 50-year-old men in a place where you're not supposed to show any vulnerability, look at me and say, hey, Ryan, I can't read. Can you help me? And I don't know if I've, being in the cowboy culture of growing up in Montana, to the locker rooms of athletics and in the NFL, I don't know if I've ever heard another man say that. Can you help me? I don't believe I had ever heard that before. So I had it was a perspective shift. And nothing would have changed if I would have just been there that day. But I kept coming back, and a few weeks in, I felt like I was more personable. I was sleeping better. I was talking to my family. And what I came to understand is that I was being of service to another human being for the first time in my life, I think. I used to think what I did on Saturdays and Sundays was me being of service and, and entertaining people. And it's just nonsense, really is. And, when that stopped, I applied for the TA's position with the substance abuse counselor. And, a few months came on, and the next time parole came up, I didn't dismiss it. I didn't waive it. I said, I applied for it, and I was granted. And I was released December 3rd, 2014, after 32 months. And I had no idea what was out there for me. The only two people there to pick me up were my mom and dad. I didn't have any money. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have any prospects. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. I had hope. And I don't know at the moment if I knew why I had that hope. I do now, of course. It's because of the stuff I had done while in prison. But I had this hope, and away I went. Hometown newspaper printed a cartoon the day I got out. That was a goofy picture of me telling the town of Great Falls, Montana, to lock up your medicine cabinets. Ryan Leaf's back. So it was. I was going to continue to be drugged through it because of my actions. Mm-hmm. There's consequences to them.
Your parents picked you up at prison. There was a cartoon of you in the newspaper in Great Falls, Montana, your hometown. The feeling you had at that point, and what was your plan?
Well, my plan was to go to treatment because you don't get rehabilitated in prison. I needed to go someplace to focus on my mental health and my physical health. Really, I was about 325 pounds, about to stroke out from high blood pressure. And, for the first 3 months, my parole officer wouldn't let me go to treatment because it was out of state. No one who gets out of prison asks to go to an institution again. It's like you want to be free, but I knew I needed it. But luckily he changed his mind about 3 months in, and 1st of March, 2013 or 2015, he allowed me to go to treatment down in Southern California. And I went and spent 90 days in an inpatient facility, working on my mental health, my physical health, and, understanding why the substance abuse was the symptom of it all. And that was a huge step in the right direction. And I watched people come and go after 28 days. And I was like, just letting you know, I'm 3 years sober, but I'm going to stay here for 90 days because, this is a 180-degree lifestyle change. And sure enough, I'd see a couple of them come back within the 90 days I was there because they just didn't understand the shift that has to be made. And I reached out to a sober living company and asked for a job. And when they interviewed me, and they said, normally we start guys out at $10 an hour, but we'll start you out at 15. And the only reason I kind of tell you that is because I was making $5 million a year and was miserable. And I was just offered a job for $15 an hour and felt more value than I'd ever felt before. So my perspective had to shift greatly. Those three ideals of success were not true at all. And that's how it started. But I also thought I was never going to be in the public eye again. I was just going to kind of just disappear, be sober, work, and be the best possible man I could be. My boss, who ultimately became my business partner, had different ideas. He was a sports fan. He knew how impactful my story could be. And so he started broaching the idea of starting a mentoring type program where I would go to local schools and essentially share my story. And that's how it started. ESPN reached out, E60. They wanted to do a documentary. I was like, I don't know. If you do, it's going to have to be long-term. You just can't come in for a week and me fool you with the puff piece. So they followed me around for the next 18 months. And those speaking engagements became bigger and more across the country. And when the documentary aired, it really made an impact. There are a ton of people that struggle with this every single day. And sometimes they just need to hear another story that sounds like theirs and a solution. Mm-hmm. And that's what it became. And my sponsor tells me all the time that you can't keep that peaceful, unchaotic life unless you give it away. And I didn't quite understand what that meant at the time, but I do clearly now. that I can't keep this new life unless I give away my story, and it be unvarnished and truthful and vulnerable and transparent. And that's what I've done for the last, 6 years since I've been out. Now my family life has grown differently. I have a 3.5-year-old son. My professional career has blossomed because of it. I got to work, I tell people all the time, I said, I walked out of a prison cell, just over 6 years ago. And then I get a job from the Disney Corporation. How's that even real? It's been amazing. But the foundation of it all has to start with my recovery. That's the foundation of it all. And it can't ever be about me again, ever. And when it starts to become about me, I have to, get outside myself, be of service to someone else, and carry that message. And that's the only way I know now. And it's the only way I can move forward, because if I don't, if I make it about me, or if I, act out in old behavior, I'll go back to prison. I'm allergic to, any mood altering substance, and I break out in handcuffs. That's just the way it works. And so I have to be vigilant, and I got an unbelievable support staff around me who've been around me for the last 6 years. It's funny to see the ones that were around during the heyday, who disappeared when things got bad, start to creep back into my life. I've resented them for a long time. I've forgiven them, but it doesn't mean I have to have relationships with them, because I truly have people around me now who support me, who hold me accountable, and who unconditionally love me. And that's the greatest gift of all.
Ryan, you talk about forgiveness, and in my book, Rebound, I talk about forgiveness. And the hardest thing, I think, for a competitive athlete, coach, to do is to forgive. I think that's the hardest thing in the Bible to accomplish, but it's the most selfish thing I think we can do when I learned to forgive others. But more importantly, I had to learn to forgive myself, because the negative self-talk of why did I do that? How stupid was I? Is so unhealthy. Talk to me about the process of forgiveness for you.
So it was something that my sponsor recommended to me at night, to pray for those that I was resentful of, angry with, to pray that they could find my peaceful, unchaotic life as well, that they could have that. And it was extremely difficult early on. It was said through gritted teeth. But once you do it for, 365 days in a row, it's like muscle memory, right? And you truly believe it in your heart. Like, I'm not angry with you anymore. I forgive you. And I only hope that you find the peace and serenity that I have. And that's the prayer. And that's how I've forgiven people. Now,
can you repeat that prayer, please?
I hope that you find the peace and serenity that I now have, and I forgive you. That's what I say on a nightly basis. There's still a lot of difficulty. There are resentments that crop up from time to time. I address them with my sponsor. We talk about them. I journal about it, and then I go about it in the nightly prayer. And someone new may get added to the list because I didn't realize that there was a resentment that was still smoldering in my mind, and it's triggered by some event or something that goes on, because I still deal with the mental illness, right? I truly believe I'm living with CTE, which has had such a traumatic effect on a bunch of former NFL players, and even younger players who never even made it to the NFL, whose lives have been cut short because they weren't able to address it in a healthy way, because it was so scary and they were so fearful and they were so worried about what other people would think. I think the best thing for me is, there were huge consequences to my actions, and the spotlight was on me, and I was forced to address them in a healthy, positive way. But I also acknowledge that I'm probably living with it. We can't diagnose it until post-mortem. Mm-hmm. And so we just know what the symptoms look like. And clearly, they really fit with me, mental illness, substance abuse. I had a traumatic brain tumor removed in 2010, and impulsive actions, bursts of anger, all of these things that exist for me still, even though I'm living, a life in recovery, a sober life. And that, I have to acknowledge that, like, every day isn't great for me, right? I'm still this flawed human being like everybody else, trying to be better. And I never want anybody to think like, oh, wow, his life is wonderful, it's great. Hey, life is life. It's not fair. It's all about how you deal with it. And I just dealt with it so poorly for a long, long time. And now I understand I have the choice, no matter what, to deal with it in a healthy, positive way.
You talk about triggers, and I mentioned in my book, I call it the bridge over the bitter river, where you're paying this hefty toll. Say giving up alcohol and trying to do the right thing, and you get on the bridge. There's no guardrails. It's a windy road. It's windy. And then there's that trigger. And for me, it could be the NCAA tournament. For you, it could be Peyton Manning doing a commercial. And then you get pissed.
No,
and you
not at all.
Drive off into. What are your triggers? What triggers do you have to deal with, and how do you manage them?
Very critical judgment from loved ones. I've been overly criticized and judged since I was 11 years old. From the local media, from the local town, and then into college, and then at the NFL level, and from every fan you can imagine. So I've really compartmentalized and made an understanding around what other people think of me is none of my business. Really hard when it comes to people I love, and particularly my mother, my kid's mom. I take that extremely personally, and it may not be a personal attack on me, but rather just a constructive criticism. But I will be triggered by it so harshly, because I will think it's so shaming. I was shamed so much my whole life, and I believe I'm a bad person. So that's what triggers it. And so, it's. So
how do you manage that? What happens?
My heart rate goes up. I get flushed. I could start sweating. I get incredibly angry. And then I'm in a fight or flight moment. And for me, I've always been a flight guy, where I go and I disappear, and I try to, calm down and recalculate. Now that I have, tools at my side in these last 6 years since I've been out, I go to those, right? My sponsor, mentors, my therapist, exercise, those things. And now I usually can bounce back from it in a matter of, an hour. Before, it would fuel a rage in me, as we clearly saw, for maybe years, but I understand they're there, and I understand why they are. My therapist and I continue to work on it, because, I do know that people aren't trying to be mean. Those who I love and who love me, they're actually trying to help. But it's just been so ingrained in me for so long that, Ryan, you're a bad person. That's what I hear from loved ones. That's why it hurts the most. It's not hurtful when I hear some troll on Twitter say it, because they don't mean anything to me. But people who mean everything to me, who I've told my pain to, hurt me. That's the huge triggering moment. And I understand it. Still doesn't change the physiological effect it has on me in that moment. And I have to be extremely self-aware. And for me, flight is a great coping mechanism for me.
Wow. Well, Ryan, we have 5 minutes, and I want to ask you a couple questions. What would you tell your younger self today, and or someone who might be on the edge of desperation, anxiety, dealing with some of the feelings that you felt when you were in your early 20s through, your worst, darkest days?
Well, the younger version of me, I would tell them that this is going to hurt like hell, but you're going to be okay. That's all I would tell them, because I wouldn't want to change anything, because I wouldn't have the experience and be who I am today. So that's the advice I give myself, is that, hey, it's going to hurt like hell, but you're going to be okay on the other end. Now, if I'm talking to somebody else, I simply just tell them my story and not tell them what to do or what not to do. And I tell them that the 3 keys to success aren't the money, power, and prestige that I believed in. It's about accountability, it's about spirituality, and it's about community. Those are the 3 things. If you live in that world of those 3 things, you will be just fine. Just because you're a great athlete doesn't make you a good person. Build from there, and everything will be fine. There's only 27,000 of us who have ever played in the NFL, so you've already accomplished so much. And that I'm here for them. That's the other thing. Like, I'm here for you. I don't want anybody ever to be as miserable as I was and feel so alone. That's the most important advice I give to people, that, asking for help is the strongest thing you'll ever do. It is absolutely the strongest thing you will ever do.
If people want to follow you, reach out to your organization, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, my social media platforms are open. Like, my direct messages are open to the public. So since this pandemic hit a year ago, I've probably received upwards to 10,000 messages from people who are struggling, who just want somebody to listen. And it's been a bit overwhelming, and I've tried to answer as many as I can. But that's a great way. On Twitter or on Instagram, at Ryan D. Leaf. You can go to my website, theryanDleaf.com. I just launched a new TV show on YouTube called The Ryan D. Leaf Show. It's sports centric, but we really talk about life and how to deal with it in a healthy, positive way, and how we struggle. And sports brings us together to have these open and honest conversations, just like you and I today. So those are the best ways to get a hold of me. And I'm always here for everybody and anybody who needs to share. That's my main priority in life.
Wow.
To be of service.
Well, Ryan, I can't thank you enough. This is powerful, just really powerful. And you sharing will touch so many lives, more than you could ever do than throwing from the pocket.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Overcoming setbacks is a huge challenge. We often feel all alone and try to wear a strong mask, but that mask often becomes so heavy that we become broken. Admitting your vulnerability is freeing. Vulnerability is the new invincibility, says my good friend Brian Moran. Thank you for listening to the Rebound podcast. I welcome any and all feedback. You can reach me on Twitter at Doherty Matt. Thank you.